Welcome back to the deep dive. This is it, the final deep dive in our series, Wisdom Unveiled.
Yeah, 15 episodes exploring, well, the philosophical heart of Hakim Abul Qasim Ferdowsi's work, and we've had this unique lens throughout.
Right. And for this final installment, that lens comes from these insightful conversations we've drawn from, specifically 15 audio files from Marifat.
That's right, featuring philosophers like Dr. Ibrahim Dinani and Dr. Ismail Manzuri Larijani, and they offer, well, a really profound perspective on the Shahnameh. It goes way beyond just the epic stories.
Absolutely. So our mission really in this deep dive is to try and distill the core, the enduring wisdom and ethical guidance these philosophers find in Ferdowsi's epic.
We're looking for those vital insights, the true cargo that the stories are really carrying.
Moving past just the surface narrative.
To find that deep, maybe transformative knowledge.
Exactly. Okay, now just a crucial note right up front. This deep dive is a translation and reproduction of conversations with Iranian philosophers like Dr. Ibrahim Dinani and Dr. Ismail Manzuri Larijani. Some concepts or details may not be fully conveyed. We apologize in advance for any discrepancies.
And your feedback and suggestions for improvement are most welcome.
Definitely.
It's complex stuff. We're doing our best to capture the essence.
Okay, let's dive in. These philosophers, they start by emphasizing something pretty fundamental. Calling Ferdowsi Hakim, a sage, not just a poet or historian.
Right.
What does that title immediately signal about how they view his work?
It's a huge signal. It fundamentally shifts the perspective. Calling him Hakim means they see him, first and foremost, as a source of deep wisdom. A philosopher, really, but in poetic form.
Not just an adib, like a skilled writer.
Exactly. Not just a literary artist or someone recording history. His work is understood to contain these profound philosophical, spiritual truths.
So it's wisdom literature first, disguised as this epic poem.
Precisely. And they take it even further. They also see him as a social reformer, using his work to guide society, and crucially, as a deeply devout Muslim.
No interest.
Some even suggest he embodied the ideals of a perfect Shia. His faith isn't just incidental. They see it as the very foundation the Shahnameh springs from.
So his spiritual understanding is the bedrock.
Okay.
And if that's the bedrock, what's the ultimate structure he's building? Where is it all pointing?
From this philosophical view, the whole massive tapestry of the Shahnameh, it's ultimately pointing towards two central concepts.
Maldab.
The origin, which is God, source of everything, and Mad, the return. Our journey back to that origin, back to God.
Wow. So all the famous stories, the heroes like Rostam, the huge battles, they aren't the main point then?
Not the ultimate point, no. They're seen as bahana. Which means like pretexts or brilliant narrative frameworks, captivating stories designed to pull you in. But their true cargo, their real purpose.
It's the deeper stuff.
Exactly. It's to convey deeper lessons about wisdom, ethics, virtues like kindness, justice, and ultimately, devotion to God.
So the story is the hook, but the wisdom is the hidden treasure.
That's the core idea. And it connects to Ferdowsi being a kresigu, a storyteller. These philosophers highlight something fascinating here.
What's that?
Humans are, unique in our ability for complex storytelling.
We really are. The storytelling animals.
Right. And they suggest maybe this unique human ability actually reflects our connection to the divine. They point to the Quran where God says, "We narrate to you the best of stories."
So God is the ultimate storyteller.
Kind of, yeah. Suggesting maybe our ability for narrative, for creating and understanding stories that go beyond just now and here. It comes from our intellect, our akal.
So storytelling isn't just a skill, it's like an echo of the divine in us, powered by our intellect. That's a pretty powerful thought.
It definitely elevates the whole act of storytelling, doesn't it? Makes it potentially something sacred.
Okay, so if Ferdowsi is this sage, this storyteller carrying profound spiritual cargo, it implies his language must have layers, right? It can't just be literal.
Absolutely. They really emphasize this, that the words of a sage, like Ferdowsi, have an inner meaning, a
batten, beneath the surface.
Yes. And within that batten, you find symbols, rams, and subtle pointers, ishara, that guide the reader towards a deeper understanding.
You're like looking through a window to see the landscape beyond it.
That's a great analogy. And they see Ferdowsi hinting at this himself. They quote those famous lines about building a high palace of verse that will last forever.
Right, contrasting it with Sultan Mahmud's power, which fades.
Exactly. And crucially, he adds, "All my stories contain wisdom, for those with intellect.
That feels like a direct shot at the Sultan, doesn't it? Like saying you didn't get it because you didn't have the intellect, the capacity to see the wisdom.
Precisely. It's Ferdowsi saying loud and clear, look, the deeper meaning is here, but you need a certain kind of reader, a certain kind of listener to actually access it.
Which brings us to us, the listener's role. If the text has this depth, what do we need to bring to the table?
You need what they call capacity or readiness. The terms are kabiliyat or zarf.
Kabiliyat. Zarf.
Yeah. Think of it like tuning a radio. The signal's broadcasting the wisdom's in the text, but your receiver needs to be tuned correctly to actually pick it up clearly.
Okay.
Or like planting a seed, the wisdom. It needs fertile soil. That's the kabiliyat, not barren ground, which they call char. It needs the right conditions to take root and grow.
So the responsibility isn't just on Ferdowsi for writing wisely. It's actually on us to cultivate that inner readiness, that fertile ground, to receive the wisdom.
It demands active inner work, really.
Hmm.
Engagement, not just passive reading. You have to prepare yourself.
This idea of capacity and the nature of life itself seems to lead into some recurring themes in the Shahnameh. One big one is the color of the rose and pain of the thorn. Gul o renji kar.
Yes.
What's that duality telling us about life according to this view?
It's a really vivid symbol of life's inherent duality. It's never just one thing. Beauty, joy, success. The rose, they're tangled up with hardship, pain, sorrow, the thorn.
Can't have one without the other, often.
Often experienced together, yeah. Life is fundamentally a mix.
Right.
And they view the world as fundamentally a place where range suffering, hardship, is just a constant presence.
So the big question becomes,
how do we navigate that?
Yeah.
How do we deal with a reality where difficulty is, well, inevitable?
And time just makes it all feel more poignant, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's that line, it's incredibly moving. Youth is a spring that does not repeat.
Oof. Yeah. Powerful. It's a stark reminder of how fleeting time and opportunity are.
Yeah.
Youth is painted as this peak moment, full of potential, but it only happens once.
It's a non-renewable resource.
Totally. Like that related idea, many springs shall come when we are dusting. Our time here is limited.
Right.
And these lines, they aren't just sad poems. They're metaphors for all of life's opportunities. Time is finite. It has to be used wisely, especially for cultivating that inner life, that capacity we talked about. Those moments just don't come back.
Okay, so if time is fleeting and life includes suffering, where should we focus? These philosophers argue the really critical conflict isn't external, it's internal. What's this inner battle?
Right. According to their reading, the most crucial battle we face isn't against external enemies. It's against what's called the commanding self, the nafsi amara.
Nafsi amara.
Yeah. This is the part of us driven by, base desires, raw impulses, the ego, relentless self-centered demands. It's constantly pulling us away from virtue, from wisdom, from our spiritual path.
The ego just wanting its own way all the time.
Pretty much. Well, external forces like Ahriman or Satan are acknowledged as tempters.
Sure.
The main battlefield is inside us. And the outcome of that struggle, that's what really determines our spiritual fate.
And is winning this battle something you can just do with willpower? Or they stress that overcoming the nafs requires divine support, ilahi, sometimes called far or ta'id.
Divine support, far, ta'id. Yeah, it's seen as a kind of divine grace or assistance that's essential for navigating this incredibly hard internal fight. Without that support, it's seen as, well, almost impossible to achieve real self-mastery.
This brings up that classic question, though. If God is pure good, where does evil come from? How do these philosophers reading Ferdowsi tackle that?
They're very clear on this. It comes down to a principle.
Oh.
From absolute good, only good can ultimately originate, since God is pure goodness.
Then evil or misfortune can't originate from God?
Not directly, no. Not as some independent force God creates. It originates from human actions, human choices, or deviations from the right path, often driven by that unmastered nafsi amara we just discussed.
Ah, okay.
So Ahriman, or Satan, isn't seen as an equal opposing power to God. He's a created being, a tempter. But his influence only works if we allow it. If we give in through our own weaknesses or our unmastered desires. There's no, co-equal power of evil battling God.
So our choices, our inner state, that's what opens the door to what we experience as evil or suffering.
Exactly. It comes back to our responsibility, our internal condition.
Let's shift to ethics. They make a really specific, important distinction about judging goodness. Can you unpack that?
Yes, absolutely. It's the distinction between the goodness of the action, which is Hassan Faili, and the goodness of the doer or intention, Hassan Faili.
Okay, Has Feli, That's the outward deed itself, what people see.
Correct. The observable action, giving charity, helping someone, speaking kindly. On the surface, it looks good.
And Hassan Fayili, that's the inner intention, the why behind it.
Precisely. Why is someone doing this? Is it to be seen, to get praise? Or are they acting purely for the sake of goodness itself or, for the love of God?
So an action might look good outwardly, Hassan Fayili, but if the intention, the Hassan Fayili, is impure, like if you're doing it for ego or fame,
then it lacks true inner goodness. That's the critical distinction. The ideal, the most virtuous act happens when both align.
a good action from a pure intention.
Exactly. They connect this to how Scripture often praises secret charity, where the act is unseen by others. The implication is the intention must be aimed purely at the divine, showing high Hassan Fayili.
So the core ethical message isn't just what you do, but fundamentally why you do it. Okay. If you pull all these ethical threads together, what's the sort of overarching rule they draw from Ferdowsi?
It gets distilled into something that sounds simple, but is actually huge. Incline towards goodness, do not harm anyone.
Incline towards goodness, do not harm anyone, and that anyone is taken really broadly.
Incredibly broadly. It's not just other humans. It extends to all of creation animals, the environment. It's a universal ethic of non-maleficence and also actively leaning towards good.
And our actions become the mirror of what's inside.
They quote Ferdowsi directly on this. The head of goodwill is your action, which is the mirror of your religion and thought. Basically, what you do is the ultimate, undeniable reflection of your inner world, your beliefs, your character, your true inclination.
Which brings us to this ideal human quality in the Shahnameh, Javan Mardi. What does that involve? It's more than just physical strength, right?
Oh, much more. Javan Mardi is a cornerstone ideal. Yes, it includes bravery, physical strength sometimes, but it's fundamentally about inner strength and character.
Like what?
Integrity, honesty, selflessness, a willingness to sacrifice, and maybe most importantly, a steadfast commitment to standing against injustice. It's a kind of noble manliness, or maybe human excellence is better.
And they contrast this ideal with, say, more pragmatic or self-serving modern views.
They do, yeah. They explicitly contrast it, for example, with ideas often tied to Machiavelli, where political expediency or power might override intrinsic virtue, or that principle of not causing harm. Javan Mardi puts inner character and virtue first, even when it's tough.
And the symbolism, the Seymour training Rostam.
That's seen as representing a form of divine teaching or support. The ta'id we mentioned earlier, the divine assistance needed to overcome the nafs. It suggests the ideal of Javan Mardi isn't just a human goal, but it's somehow aligned with or even assisted by something higher.
That definitely elevates it. Okay, speaking of the inner world, they highlight a really practical insight, how our internal state directly shapes how we actually perceive and experience reality.
This is a really powerful takeaway, I think. They explain how your inner landscape, your thoughts, your fears, especially if you harbor negative assumptions about others.
Susan. Negative assumptions.
Yeah, or dwelling on envy. These things fundamentally create your experience of the world, often regardless of what's actually happening outside you.
So these negative inner states create a specific kind of feeling.
Yes, they call it tangi.
Kangi.
Constriction, narrowness. It's that feeling of the world being tight, difficult, suffocating, like you're boxed in. And often that feeling comes from inside, from our own negative thoughts, not from external stuff.
Okay, so what's the opposite feeling then?
That's faraki. Spaciousness, expansiveness, ease, a feeling of inner freedom and lightness.
And that comes from?
Cultivating good thoughts, developing clear wisdom, akli roshan, a bright intellect maintaining a broad perspective, and especially practicing isla izan, actively presuming goodness in others. Giving them the benefit of the doubt, basically.
Ferdowsi's line seems to nail this. Don't make the world narrow for you, even though it's spacious.
It connects it perfectly. Your inner choices, your state of mind, directly impact your felt reality. Wisdom, that akli roshan, is the key to breaking out of tangi and finding that inner faraki.
Within that internal battle against the nafs, they pointed out a couple of inner enemies that get particularly nasty, especially when combined with external power.
Right, two really potent ones. Gazab,
Gazab,
anger, uncontrolled rage, and shahawa, excessive insatiable desire, whether it's for pleasure, possession, status, control, these appetites that can just never truly be filled. And if they're unchecked, they lead to immense harm, personally and societally.
And the more external power someone has, the more damage these unchecked forces can wreak.
Precisely. They use that classic analogy. The king and the dervish. The king might control a huge empire, massive external power, right?
Sure.
But if he's ruled internally by his own rage, his ghazab, and his insatiable desires, his shahawat, then he's actually a slave. He's enslaved by his inner enemies.
Right.
The dervish, though, who might have nothing externally but has achieved mastery over his own anger and desires, he's the true king, master of himself.
Real power is self-mastery. That completely flips the script on what it means to be powerful.
It really does. And these deep philosophical ideas, they seem to even echo in cultural practices.
Oh, so?
Well, they point to practices like Nowruz, the Persian New Year. It's not just seen as a holiday, but as embodying these ethical principles on a societal level.
Like that saying, if you're good, every day is Nowruz.
Exactly. The customs themselves, the emphasis on renewal, forgiving old grudges, letting go of those negative assumptions, the Susan, to foster Faraki.
Practicing Ayla.
Right. And the traditions of generosity, helping the poor. It's like the cultural practice becomes a living expression of these philosophical and ethical ideals from Ferdowsi.
Wow. Okay, so we've gone from Ferdowsi as sage to the text layers, the need for inner capacity, life's duality, the critical internal battle where evil comes from, the ethics of intention, the ideal of Jawan Mardi, the inner world shaping reality, and even cultural echoes. What's the ultimate enduring message they want us to take away from this whole deep dive into Ferdowsi?
I think fundamentally it's the profound and lasting value of goodness and wisdom above everything else, above all material things, all temporal pursuits.
Because worldly things, wealth, power, fame.
Even physical structures, they're temporary. They decay, they pass away.
But for goodness, nothing else remains, something like that.
That's the core idea, yeah? The impact of a life lived virtuously, the wisdom you cultivate and share, the good deeds done with pure intention, that is the only true legacy. That's what truly endures beyond our time here. That's what genuinely lasts.
It really transforms the Shahnameh, doesn't it? From
Yes.
just an epic of battles and kings into, well, a guide for life's biggest questions and those crucial internal struggles.
The guide for cultivating wisdom, virtue, and achieving, ultimately, true inner freedom.
A powerful journey. So as we bring this deep dive, and actually the entire Wisdom Unveiled series, to a close, here's maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. We've talked about Tangi, that feeling of inner constriction, narrowness, and Faraki, that feeling of spaciousness, ease. Given how strongly these philosophers argue that your inner state shapes your reality.
Looking inward for the outward change.
Exactly. Could the path to finding more spaciousness, more ease, more Faraki in your life lie not mainly in changing the world around you, but in exploring the world within you? Could consciously challenging those negative assumptions that, Susan, you might hold about others, or actively working on mastering your own inner battles with anger, ghazab, or that insatiable wanting, shahawat, could that be the key? The key to unlocking a wider, freer, more spacious experience of life.
Something to definitely ponder.
Something to ponder long after this deep dive is over. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through Ferdowsi's wisdom and for being with us for the entire Wisdom Unveiled series. It's been great.
Thank you. It really has been a privilege to share these insights with you all.